Please hold for commentary based on the Book of Ecclesiastes following the news. President Donald Trump stood before a summit of Asian leaders keen on regional trade pacts and delivered a roaring America First message Friday, denouncing China for unfair trade practices just a day after he had heaped praise on President Xi Jinping in Beijing. Quote, "We are not going to let the United States be taken advantage of anymore," end quote, Trump told CEOs on the sidelines of the Asia-Pacific Economic Cooperation Conference. Quote, "I am always going to put America first, the same way that I expect all of you in this room to put your countries first," end quote. The president, who pulled the United States out of the Pacific Rim Trade Pact known as the Trans-Pacific Partnership, said the U.S. would no longer join, quote, "large agreements that tie our hands, surrender our sovereignty, and make meaningful enforcement practically impossible," end quote. Instead, he said, the U.S. will pursue one-on-one trade deals with other nations that pledge fair and reciprocal trade. The message stood in sharp contrast to the behind-the-scenes negotiations taking place among other countries at the summit on a successor to TPP. As for China, Trump said he'd spoken openly and directly with Xi about the nation's abusive trade practices and, quote, "the enormous trade deficits they have produced with the United States," end quote. It was a stark change in tone from the day before, when Trump was Xi's guest of honor during a state visit in Beijing. There, Trump opted for flattering Xi and blaming past U.S. presidents for the trade deficit. Trump said China's trade surplus, which stood at $223 billion for the first 10 months of the year, was unacceptable. He repeated his language from Thursday when he said he did, quote, "not blame China," end quote, or any other country for, quote, "taking advantage of the United States on trade," end quote. But Trump added forceful complaints about, quote, "the audacious theft of intellectual property, massive subsidizing of industries through colossal state enterprises, and American companies being targeted by state-affiliated actors for economic gain," end quote, without singling China out by name. U.S. officials have raised similar concerns in the past about China, especially with regard to intellectual property. On Saturday, Trump attended meetings with the leaders of the 21-member APEC countries. Later in the day, he was to fly to Hanoi, the capital, to attend a state banquet before formal meetings Sunday with Vietnam's president and prime minister. Opiate drug abuse has killed more Americans than the Iraq, Afghanistan, and Vietnam wars combined, and U.S. veterans and advocates this Veterans Day are focusing on how to help victims of the crisis. Veterans are twice as likely as non-veterans to die from accidental overdoses of the highly addictive painkillers, a rate that reflects high levels of chronic pain among vets, particularly those who served in the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan, according to federal data. U.S. government and healthcare officials have been struggling to stem the epidemic of overdoses, which killed more than 64,000 Americans in 12 months ending last January alone, a 21% increase over the previous year, according to the Centers for Disease Control. About 65,000 Americans died in Vietnam, Iraq, and Afghanistan. President Donald Trump named opioids a national public health emergency, and a White House commission last week recommended establishing a nationwide system of drug courts and easier access to alternatives to opioids for people in pain. Quote, "Our veterans deserve better than polished sound bites and empty promises," end quote, said former Democratic Congressman Patrick Kennedy, a recovering addict and a member of the President's Opioid Commission. Kennedy said in an email that more funding was needed for treatment facilities and medical professionals to help tackle the problem. One effort to address the issue has stalled in Congress, the proposed Veterans Over-Medication Prevention Act, sponsored by Senator John McCain. That measure is aimed at researching ways to help Veterans Administration doctors rely less on opioids in treating chronic pain. Quote, "The Veterans Administration needs to understand whether over-medication of drugs, such as opioid painkillers, is a contributing factor in suicide-related deaths," end quote, McCain, one of the nation's most visible veterans, said in an email on Thursday. He noted that 20 veterans take their lives every day, a suicide rate 21% higher than for U.S. adults. The VA system has stepped up its efforts to address the crisis, having treated some 68,000 veterans for opiate addiction since March, said Department of Veterans Affairs spokesman Curtis Kishore. The department's Lewis Stokes VA Center in Cleveland has also begun testing alternative treatments, including acupuncture and yoga, to reduce use of and dependency on the drugs, the VA said. A delay in naming a Trump administration drug czar to head the effort, however, has fueled doubts about immediate action on the opiate crisis. Last month, the White House nominee, Representative Tom Marino, withdrew from consideration following a report he spearheaded a bill that hurt the government's ability to crack down on opiate makers. The United States Air Force missed at least 2 chances to block the shooter in last weekend's deadly church attack in Texas from buying guns after he was accused of a violent offense in 2012, according to current and former government officials and a review of military documents. A third opportunity to flag shooter Devin Kelley was lost 2 years later by a twist of bad luck when a Pentagon inspection of cases narrowly missed the former airman. The Air Force said on Monday it had failed to provide information as required about Kelly's criminal history to the Federal Bureau of Investigation's criminal databases. It gave few other details about the omission. If Pentagon rules had been followed, the Air Force should have put Kelly into national criminal databases used for background checks soon after he was charged. The Air Force should then have flagged Kelly, 26, again later that year after his court-martial conviction for assault, which permanently disqualified him from legally getting a gun. Kelly bought guns from a store in Texas in 2016 and 2017, although it is not clear whether these were the weapons he used last Sunday to attack churchgoers in Sutherland Springs before killing himself. Authorities said he killed 26 people, including a pregnant woman's unborn child. If the Air Force had flagged Kelly to the FBI earlier, when he was charged and convicted, he would have been unable to get a gun legally. Reuters has been unable to determine exactly how or why Kelly's records were not shared. Kelly also narrowly slipped through the system in 2014 when the Pentagon's Inspector General told the Air Force it was routinely failing to send criminal records to the FBI and urged them to correct this in some old cases like Kelly's. The Inspector General's office said it was investigating what happened with Kelly's file and suggested that the military should have done more after its report to correct errors in sharing information. According to statements from the Air Force and FBI and a review of Defense Department rules, the first mistake came when the Air Force failed to send Kelly's fingerprints. The military makes it mandatory to collect fingerprints when someone is accused of a serious crime, such as assault, as Kelly was in June of 2012. By then, the U.S. military had recently switched to using the FBI's automated record submission system for all fingerprints, which digitally scans, prints, and adds them to the FBI databases. It was not clear what happened to Kelly's fingerprints. The Air Force said it was investigating whether they were even taken. Entering his fingerprints and other information in the FBI's so-called Interstate Identification Index would have been enough to flag Kelly as needing further investigation in 2016 when he tried to buy a gun at a San Antonio store. The FBI would have then asked the Air Force the outcome of Kelly's case. The airman was convicted of a crime involving domestic violence that carries a maximum penalty of more than 1 year in prison, both of which disqualify a person from buying guns and ammunition under federal law. The FBI could have then added Kelly's name to the National Instant Criminal Background Check System indices, which would mean he would instantly fail future background checks. Instead, Kelly cleared the background check and walked out of the store with a gun and returned the following year, passed another background check, and bought a second one, the store said. Attorneys representing Mike Flynn, a former aide to President Donald Trump, said on Friday a Wall Street Journal report about their client that included allegations, quote, ranging from kidnapping to bribery was outrageous and false. Robert Kellner, Stephen Anthony, and Brian Smith said that out of respect for the various investigations into alleged Russian meddling in the 2016 U.S. election, they had avoided responding to, quote, every rumor or allegation raised in the media. But today's news cycle has brought allegations about General Flynn, ranging from kidnapping to bribery, that are so outrageous and prejudicial that we are making an exception to our usual rule. They are false, they said in a statement. Hezbollah's leader said on Friday that Saudi Arabia had declared war on Lebanon and his Iran-backed group, accusing Riyadh of detaining Saad al-Hariri and forcing him to resign as Lebanon's prime minister to destabilize the country. France became the first Western country to indicate that Saudi Arabia was holding Hariri against his will, saying it wished for him to have, quote, all his freedom of movement and be fully able to play the essential role that is his in Lebanon, end quote. Hariri's resignation has plunged Lebanon into crisis, thrusting the small Arab country back to the forefront of regional rivalry between the Sunni Muslim monarchy Saudi Arabia and Shiite revolutionary Iran. Riyadh says Hariri is a free man and he decided to resign because Hezbollah was calling the shots in his government. Saudi Arabia considers Hezbollah to be its enemy in conflicts across the Middle East, including Syria and Yemen. Western countries have looked on with alarm at the rising regional tension. U.S. Secretary of State Rex Tillerson warned other countries and groups against using Lebanon as a vehicle for a larger proxy fight in the Middle East, saying Washington strongly backed Lebanon's independence and respected Hariri as a strong partner of the United States, still referring to him as Prime Minister. Quote, there is no legitimate place or role in Lebanon for any foreign forces, militias, or armed elements other than the legitimate security forces of the Lebanese state, Tillerson said in a statement released by the U.S. State Department. Tillerson told reporters on Friday there was no indication that Hariri was being held in Saudi Arabia against his will, but that the United States was monitoring the situation. The French foreign minister said earlier on Friday that he also believed Hariri was a free man, a statement at odds with the later French Foreign Ministry comment that it wanted Hariri to have, quote, all his freedom of movement, end quote. Hariri has made no public remarks since announcing his resignation in a speech televised from Saudi Arabia, saying he feared assassination and accusing Iran and Hezbollah of sowing strife in the Arab world. Two top Lebanese government officials, a senior politician close to Hariri, and a fourth source told Reuters on Thursday that the Lebanese authorities believe Hariri is being held in Saudi Arabia. Riyadh has advised Saudi citizens not to travel to Lebanon, or if already there, to leave as soon as possible. Other Gulf states have also issued travel warnings. Those steps have raised concerns that Riyadh could take measures against the tiny Arab state, which hosts 1.5 million Syrian refugees. Hariri's resignation is being widely seen as part of a Saudi attempt to counter Iran as its influence deepens in Syria and Iraq, and as Riyadh and its allies battle Iranian-allied Houthi rebels in Yemen. In comments, a top Lebanese politician said Lebanon did not deserve to be accused of declaring war on Saudi Arabia. Quote, for decades we've been friends. We are a country that is squeezed between two antagonistic interests, between Saudi Arabia and Iran, he said. The majority of Lebanese are just paying the price. Lebanon cannot afford to declare war against anybody. Those are the stories that matter this day, November 11th, 2017. Please hold for commentary based on the Book of Ecclesiastes. Senator John McCain grew up in a military family. His father was in the military. His grandfather was in the military. And McCain followed suit. He graduated from the Naval Academy and served in Vietnam. While in Vietnam, he was taken prisoner and spent some hellish years as a prisoner of war in Vietnam. He returned, remained in the military for some years, and then in 1982 he ran for Congress, won the House seat, served 2 terms in the House, and then in 1986 he ran successfully for the Senate, winning that seat, and has held that seat since, so that's 31 years. In 2000 he ran for president, and lost the primaries to George W. Bush. In 2008, he won the Republican nomination and, of course, lost to Barack Obama. So Senator McCain certainly laid out his life and his career on a path. Naval Academy graduate, served in the military, was actually a POW. So the military experience certainly served him well. Gets into Congress, gets into a little bit of trouble with the Keating Five, but manages to get out of that. And he has served as a senator ever since. Now, for the most of his career, he has been staunch and conservative and promoting the Republican Party. He would, for most of his career, certainly up until 2000, he was a dependable Republican vote. He promoted the Republican Party and became a good foot soldier. So that certainly led him on a path toward the presidency. But he failed in 2000. And then again, even though he had the nomination, he failed again in 2008. So what he had planned, what he had plotted, what he had worked towards all those years had eluded him. In 2016, along comes Donald Trump. No political experience. Had never held office, not even a New York City councilman. And Donald Trump wins the big prize, the presidency. The office that John McCain had worked for his entire life, Donald Trump was able to win. Don't think for a minute that John McCain's obstinance, that his obstructionism now has to do with politics, has to do with policy. It is nothing more than a personal problem with the president, Donald Trump. Allow me to read this week's verse. It is from Ecclesiastes 9, verse 11. Last week we talked about Ecclesiastes 9:12, and we're just going to back up one verse here to Ecclesiastes 9:11. And it reads, I returned and saw under the sun that the race is not to the swift, nor the battle to the strong, nor bread to the wise, nor riches to men of understanding, nor favor to men of skill. But time and chance happen to them all. What a perfect verse to describe what is going on today in Washington, D.C. As John McCain has gone from a good foot soldier for the Republican Party to complete obstructionist or near obstructionist, standing in the way of President Donald Trump. Now, for the entire presidency of Barack Obama, John McCain voted continually to repeal the ACA. When he had the opportunity finally to vote to repeal the ACA and have it mean something, because there would have been enough votes to get health care away from the federal government and put it back into the private market, John McCain did not. John McCain swayed other senators and did not vote to repeal the ACA, something he did for 8 straight years under Barack Obama. He earlier this month said that he would obstruct the tax reform. John McCain at every turn now is making sure that he sticks a thorn in the side of President Trump. This is nothing but naked personal vendetta. And it is an absolute shame. John McCain served his country well. He served in the Senate well, served his party well for most of his career. And now that he is in the twilight of his career, probably the twilight of his life, given his cancer battle, He is now going to throw all of that away based on nothing but a personal vendetta, personal jealousy, personal vindictiveness. And it is a shame. The race is not necessarily going to the swift all the time. And that is proven by Donald Trump, a political novice who wins the biggest office, not just in this country, but in the entire world. The United States presidency is an office so unique and so powerful that it is set apart by itself. So to have that elude John McCain and be handed to Donald Trump is killing John McCain. And he will stop at nothing now. He will throw away his reputation. He will throw away all that he has built just to express his jealousy and vindictiveness at President Trump. And it is a shame. So we see this on a national level in politics with John McCain right now. But this verse also affects all of us. I mean, we see it everywhere. How about the Kardashians? Now, Kim Kardashian brought fame to that family. The initial fame, goes to her father, who defended O.J. Simpson and helped get him, off of the murder charges. But Kim Kardashian was really not known. She was a friend of Paris Hilton. That's how she got some notoriety, because for some reason this country is just obsessed with celebrity. So anybody hanging around Paris Hilton, who is a nothing, gets to have their moment of fame as well. So Kim Kardashian, records a videotape of herself, having sexual relations with a guy, and then releases that videotape. It was calculated. It was to get attention. It was to get famous. And it worked. And Kim Kardashian, whose greatest skill really is converting oxygen into carbon dioxide, just like the rest of us, suddenly is leading a family toward earning hundreds of millions of dollars. Why? Is she curing cancer? Is she engineering a rocket ship? Is she doing anything? No. She is just a celebrity. And while social workers, are working with autistic children and are getting paid the tiniest of fractions of what Kim Kardashian makes, where is the fairness? How can Kim Kardashian, who contributes nothing to society, nothing whatsoever, yet she is allowed to make millions of dollars? And who is that on? Who's it on? It's on us. It's on us because we allow it. Because we turn the channel and we click on the internet ads and the internet stories, and we want to see Kim Kardashian. Unfair, right? We see it in our personal lives. How many times have you been at work and someone gets promoted over you, or someone gets something that they don't deserve at work? They didn't work for it, or you're better. You're better. You can prove you're better, but someone else gets a promotion. Every day. We see this every day. So you need to take Ecclesiastes 9:11 here and realize that it is not really a verse about other people. It is not a verse about the people who succeed. It is about us and how we respond to that. How do we deal with the Kim Kardashian? How does John McCain deal with the Donald Trump? And that's where we show who we truly are. And that's the reason that that I believe Ecclesiastes 9:11 is there. It is to tell us that it is meaningless. It is vanity. It is a chasing after the wind. Ignore it. It's going to happen. You will get yours someday. Perhaps, perhaps not. It's still vanity. It's still a chasing after the wind, and in the end, it still will be meaningless. So the response to a Kim Kardashian, the response that John McCain should have to Donald Trump, the response that we should have when one person gets a promotion over us is to accept it. It's not to spend our breath and our time and our valuable days having it eat at us, because we can't change it. This will happen again. There will be someone who will get something without earning it, because time and chance happen to it all. It happened to Donald Trump. The time was right for a Donald Trump candidacy and presidency. Time and chance happened to us all. And it was not the time for John McCain in 2000 or 2008. And it is not the time in 2016 or 17. So how will we react? So Ecclesiastes 9:11. I'll read it again. I returned and saw under the sun that the race is not necessarily to the swift, nor the battle to the strong, nor bread to the wise, nor riches to men of understanding, nor favor to men of skill, but time and chance happen to them all. That's what we need to accept, folks. We can't change it. Spending our days having it eat at us does no good. We can't let these things eat away our time, eat away the valuable gift of a day that God has given us. Folks, that's my commentary for this week. Do not have a great day. Get out there and make it a great day. Thanks so much for being with me, and I'll talk to you soon.